What would you do if you had 24 hours? And then make that list. And then the question is, why aren't you living like that now?
I loved that because I think that I can relate to that on a personal level.
I didn't know it was going to be fictional, but I was reading a lot of Og Mandino, and he wrote a lot of books in that vein. And so I realized then it was going to be that type of book.
And that's why I think it's so important for everybody to grab a copy of this book.
So what I try to do with this book is have it become spirituality for the rest of us. So how do we reach the truck driver?
What is the greatest wisdom?
Say yes to everything, and this is going to sound weird, but say yes to everything and figure out how to do it later.
You talked about what that looks like and means for you.
Yeah, so there's the side of what does success mean to me, and then there's also, to your point, the side of, with that post, I was wanting to reveal one of the quote-unquote secrets. All that stuff led to maybe where I am today. So that was the secret I revealed in that post, is consistency.
Today's show is brought to you by Brave Healer Productions. Experience what's possible. Coming up on today's show, I've got the inspiring Corey Poirier, a 5-time TEDx speaker, best-selling author who is here to dive into his latest book and share the incredible wisdom that he has gained from interviewing over 7,500 thought leaders. I'll also be bringing you the best of the good news on the Joy Report, and we're hitting the streets for more heartwarming moments on Sharing with Shari. The excitement is just around the corner, so stay tuned. We just got word in from the National News Weather Service. There is a slight chance of a spontaneous dance party sweeping through the city. So keep those dancing shoes handy, because whether you're in the office or the grocery store, be ready to bust a move at a moment's notice. Remember, no matter the weather outside, it's always sunny here in our hearts at Joy News. Keep shining. Over to you, Shari. So joining me now, I have 5-time TEDx speaker, the founder of Blue Talks, USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He's graced covers of magazines like Success. I can go on, but it's a little awkward because he's sitting right here with me. So welcome to the show, Corey Poirier.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure knowing you, and I've been excited to get on the show since I've watched you bring the show to life.
I want to talk about, first, I just want to give you, as they say, your flowers and share with you one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show. And that's because you epitomize for me, when I think of inspiration, when I think of success, when I think of hard work, and someone with a really good heart, and a scrapper, and you're Canadian. So you have the whole package. And I wanted to have you here for all those reasons.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So that's so humbling. I'm getting better at receiving, because for a long time I would try to kind of, when somebody says anything gracious, I would try to say, oh, that's kind, but now I don't. So I receive.
I'm so glad that you get to be on the receiving end of these flowers, because they're well deserved. Success is something that everybody defines completely differently. And it's taken me on a personal level many years to define success for myself. And you talked about it recently on Facebook for all the 90-year-olds that are still there with us. And you talked about what that looks like and means for you. Can you share with me and us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's the side of what does success mean to me? And then there's also, to your point, the side of, with that post, I was wanting to reveal one of the quote-unquote secrets to any success I may have had. And so what it means to me, it means different things. I'd love to be able to sum it up into one answer. And I think, to your point, there's so many definitions because it means so many different things to people. But Bob Dylan, I just went and watched Bob Dylan here at the Hollywood Bowl the other night. And Bob Dylan had this great quote to me that defines success. And he said, if a man, and I'm going to add in, or a woman, goes to bed at night, wakes up in the morning, and in the in-between hours while they're awake, they do only that which they love, that is success. And so I could go to different definitions, but that's one of them to me, which involves my family. Doing what I love means that I get to spend time with my family. So there's so many things I think that are built into that, or baked into that one answer. But the post that I did was about what I felt is one of the secrets to not just mine, but success. As you know, I've interviewed thousands of thought leaders, so I've studied this, and it seems to be a common thread. And so what I found is, and I shared, like I say, I have a hard time sharing successes. So I went down this list of some of the things I've been able to do. And again, I always want to clarify to people, this is not a me Inc. thing, because it wasn't like a look what I've done. It was more just to say, growing up in a small town, this shouldn't have been possible. And when I say how it was possible, the answer I gave was that what I've been is consistent. So when I started, I thought, I'm going to achieve this in X amount of time. Like I remember I set goals like, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 25. And when I wasn't at 25, I started beating myself up. And then I started realizing the things that I were doing meant more to me than the $1 million. But what I'm getting at is, I thought it should be on my schedule and it wasn't. And looking back now, I can say that all these things that did happen for me were because I never stopped, even though I wanted it to happen by the time I was 25. Even though I wanted it to happen in 2 months, and it took, like Success Magazine, to get in the pages of Success Magazine was always a goal. And it ended up taking, conservatively, 7 years longer than my plan.
Yeah.
But that just means that, I said my plan and people laughed at me. And so the point is, consistency is what I've noticed for me, being there, showing up every day doing the things to move my plan forward, to move the needle forward. To me, it's about just keeping showing up and putting in the reps, we call them, and doing the work in the dark that nobody sees. They only see the light work. Yeah. All that stuff led to maybe where I am today. So that was the secret I revealed in that post, is consistency.
And I loved that, because I think that I can relate to that on a personal level. This just the same things you're talking about, like being in the dark, not knowing what the next step is, but showing up anyway, in the messy, in all of it. And I have watched you catapult in your career. I mean, you, as you just mentioned, have interviewed top thought leaders, 7,500. You have sat down with the biggest and the brightest. You've talked to people from, I always laugh, I think about like Deepak Chopra, and then I think Tommy Chong. And it's like the extremes. And I'm curious, when you sit down with these leaders, with these people, like, is there a common thread that runs through most of them? I'm
going to say, not just there are. And I say this because one of my talks in recent years was the timeless secrets of influential leaders. So it was kind of like me summarizing what Napoleon Hill shared in Think and Grow Rich. So he studied, it goes from hundreds to thousands, but let's just say hundreds of multimillionaires of the time. And he came up with 13, I guess, laws to success. And so for me, I was fascinated by finding out, is it still the same or have they changed? And that's a whole other discussion. I will say a lot of the stuff, why I call it timeless, is because what he was teaching in 1937 is the same as what I'm discovering now. But the most common trait, which he doesn't talk about because we didn't talk about it at the time, but I find it fascinating because the similar trait is his first law to success or riches. And what I found is the number one is that these people, Tommy Chong, Deepak Chopra, Les Brown, Lisa Nichols, they've figured out their purpose and they spend every day living on purpose. And I really think that's close to what Napoleon Hill talked about, or as close as you're going to get to his first chapter, which was desire. They have a strong desire to help and impact. And so for me, I would use the verbiage that they're living on purpose. So answer to your question, I could go down the top 5, but the first one, and it's like 98% of the thought leaders I interview are living on purpose every day.
I love that so much. And I know you call it vitamin P as well, which you did in your TEDx talk, which was so powerful about that they need to teach that in school. And what I love and what I think has you, and I might be wrong, but show up consistently is the fact that you know your purpose and showing up for that purpose. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about in my newest book about having a personal mission statement and why we should all have it. And sometimes I call it a purpose statement. But yes, for me, I'm really dialed into what it is. And every day I try to serve that mission statement. So my mission statement is to be the guy that motivates, donates, educates, entertains, and inspires. That's my kind of 5-point test. And so I did a show the other day where they got me to help the anchors come up with their own mission statement. And so for me, vitamin P aligns perfectly with that. It's that those 5 things I'm doing, that's my purpose. Like what I'm doing during those times when I'm serving my purpose, like when I'm creating a positive ripple for other people, I'm doing it by donating, or I'm doing it by motivating or educating. Like those things are my 5-point test. And they allow me to live every day on purpose. So I always think of that whenever somebody says, will you do this? I go, is it going to help serve those? If it's 0, it's probably a no without regret. If it's 4 or 5, it's probably a yes without regret. So it also helps me decide what a yes and no is. But to go back to your original question, yes, I'm very dialed into what my purpose is. And that mission statement allows me to stay dialed in to what my purpose is.
I love that because I know so many of our viewers, there's so many people who have all of these dreams and they could feel stuck or they could feel like they're not getting anywhere. And I know what the wisdom that you hold and what you're saying right now is really striking somebody right now, because sometimes our dreams can feel so big and so overwhelming, but being able to create your own personal purpose statement, mission statement, knowing to show up every day, it is so helpful. You talk about lessons, and in your newest book, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
The Enlightened Passenger, the flight that changes everything. You share 10 lessons in here. And, reading more about you, I read that you wanted to share lessons in here that your sons, that were the most important that your sons would learn. Can you share a little bit about that first, and then we're going to talk about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the book, essentially, the book itself is a fictional parable. And when I started with it, it was really just a seed of an idea. I won't say on air because it would ruin some of the twists and turns, but I'll tell you privately what it was. And I think it's a question I ask often. And I said, what if that was a story? That was the seed. And then I didn't know it was going to be fictional, but I was reading a lot of Og Mandino, and he wrote a lot of books in that vein. And so I realized then it was going to be that type of book. Then the next stage was, what am I going to teach in the book? And because I want it to be a story, but I want there to be life lessons. And then I started literally writing it. It came to life with these different lessons. The last piece to that was, to your point, is then I went back and looked at those lessons and said, do they all fit together? Like, should they be in the book? We removed a really big lesson from the book because it felt like we were putting it in. It didn't feel natural. And so we removed a big lesson for that reason, but we removed a few other ones and placed new ones in based on me asking the question, if I was stuck in a room with my kids for 24 hours, I could teach them 10 life lessons that I've learned before I went, what would I teach them? And what made it into the book were those lessons. What I will say is one eked its way in that wasn't even part of those 10 lessons, meaning like it wasn't what I learned from thought leaders. It was a piece of it. But what happened was I was watching an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, and the older brother, Robert, mentioned a mayfly. And I just knew of it. I didn't know what it was. And so he mentioned something about how short their lifespan was. I had no idea. I went and looked it up, and the female mayflies live 3 to 5 minutes, long enough to just have more mayflies. The males live 24 hours. So I thought I can work with 24 hours. 3 to 5 minutes is too short. But I thought, in that 24-hour span, what do the mayflies do? Live on purpose. That's all they do is serve their purpose, whatever their purpose is. And then so I started thinking, what if in the book I talked about how asking people, what would you do if you had 24 hours? And then make that list. And then the question is, why aren't you living like that now? But then actually write that list and say, okay, I'm going to incorporate some of that into every day of my life. So that lesson worked its way in that way. It wasn't part of the original ones. Other than that, the other 9 were, what would I teach my kids if I only had the room with them for 24 hours?
Well, I loved the mayfly personally. Like I only learned about it from you as well, from reading that. And it was so interesting because I'm such a big fan of, and your book's been compared to things like The Alchemist, the Celestine Prophecy. It actually reminded me a lot, I don't know if A Way of the Peaceful Warrior, Dan Millman, Peaceful Warrior. Like there's just the parable type, and I loved it so much because, for people who feel sometimes that some of the, personal development books are all like very teachy. Like this was such a great story. Who were you, Robert or Trev? I kind of know.
Well, this may surprise you then. I'm both. So when I say that, essentially it was written that way, but I didn't really think of it as I was writing it. Like, oh, I'm going to write this based on my life. But Robert sold digital printers and that type of thing for a living. So did Corey. I used to wear a suit and a tie every day for 10 years. So did Robert. And then I was totally oblivious to the idea of even the word self-help. That I didn't even know what that word was. And so that part of Robert was me. What I would say was not necessarily me is Robert's not super arrogant, but he still got that I'm better than you.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that.
Right.
So I didn't have that, but everything else is basically a Hollywoodized version of me. And then Treb, I'm not there yet. Like he's like Wayne Dyer-esque. I'm not there yet, but that's, I hope and I think, where I'm moving toward. So to me, I feel like if you took Robert and Treb right here, second half of Robert and the first half of Treb, And that's me.
I could kind of feel that because it was bouncing back and forth a little bit for me, and just kind of your journey in life. And so much of what you talked about, like I loved the graveyard, the richest people that Les Brown taught in there. And I knew that so many of the people were referring to people who you've sat down with and the wisdom you've learned from them. And that's why I think it's so important for everybody to grab a copy of this book, because it's wisdom that is just shared in such an approachable, fun, I say fun because it's an easy read for people, but the wisdom is deep in there. What's your hope for the book?
Well, it's interesting too, because you mentioned some of the names, and I will say for people, it's kind of the backstory is those things shared, like Les Brown talking about, one of the quotes in there said, when Treb was backstage with Les Brown and they were talking in the green room, they talked about synchronicity, and Les said synchronicity to him is God's way of staying anonymous. Well, what people would know is that's literally the words Les Brown said to me in his living room in Atlanta. So a lot of this stuff is actual, and then Treb trying stand-up comedy, that's what I did, as you know.
Yep.
So what I'm getting at is just for people to know, like it's all interweaved in there. Gina is Shelley. So Gina is parts of who my wife and life partner is. Cool. So all that stuff is kind of baked into there. My hope for people reading the book is, so I'm a recovering spiritual skeptic. And being a recovering spiritual skeptic, I know what I didn't know and what I didn't believe in when I didn't know and believe in that kind of stuff. And I know what I was missing. And what I also know was nobody would have been able to reach me by trying to teach me about spirituality. Meaning, even if at the time, if Deepak Chopra came in and sat across from me and talked for an hour, I still wouldn't be sold. My mother took me to tarot card readings, tea leaf readings. My wife's a shamanistic healer and a Reiki master. And for years, I still wasn't sold. And so what I try to do with this book is have it become spirituality for the rest of us. So how do we reach the truck driver who's like, that's all witchcraft? Yeah. How do we reach that person? And so I'm hoping this book eases that in for people, but it's within a story. And also by Robert being a skeptic, the person reading it goes, yeah, I am too. And then hopefully they start to see some of these things in a way, like you said, that's not forceful teaching. That's kind of my hope. And I will say one of the biggest moments for me after the book went out, I sent an email and I said, do you believe in synchronicity? And then I had this write-up. And one of the replies was from somebody in our experts bureau that we have. I did not know this about her, and her reply was, I did not believe in synchronicity, but now reading your book, I do. That sums up what you asked, what I would hope people would take. Not just synchronicity, but I hope people will become more enlightened. I don't think we ever get there, but more enlightened as they read it.
I love that. I love spiritually skeptic. I think that you are, and I'm going to use this in the best way, the everyman in the best way. You represent all of who we are at our core, goodness and wisdom and love. And we're going to keep talking, but we're going to cut to a break, and then we're going to have some fun when we return. Get your scrapbooks ready. It's a boy. A Hoffman's two-toed sloth was born at Zoo Atlanta to second-time parents Nutella and Coco and sister Olivia. This little sloth is starting big conversations about the issues that sloths face in the wild. Gina Ferry, Vice President of Collections and Conservation, says that the zoo is excited about the sloth's birth, but acknowledges the mounting environment hazards sloths face. The zoo supports the Sloth Conservation Project, which works to rescue, rehabilitate, and release wild sloths impacted by deforestation and power line injuries. Working together with Association of Zoos and Aquariums, these institutions are conserving and maintaining the population of two-toed sloths. This happy family is a symbol of hope for the future of sloths. One of my favorite things about the show is connecting with you. A viewer wrote in and asked, Dear Shari, how do you know whether a change is going to be good or bad? The age-old question. Here's the thing, change is always like a bit of opening a mystery gift. You won't know if it's a fabulous surprise or something you want to return until you've unwrapped it. And I know that might not be the answer you were hoping for, but it's the truth. Stepping out of your comfort zone is how you learn and grow. And who knows, you might surprise yourself with just how much you can handle. And if the change ends up being more meh than marvelous, guess what? You can always pivot back or adjust. Either way, you'll walk away with a new story and a little bit more wisdom under your belt. So I'm back here with Corey Poirier, and I am reeling him into one of my favorite games, Word Sneak. We're each gonna get 5 cards.
Okay.
The goal of this is to work these words seamlessly into a conversation. And so let's have some fun.
Okay.
All right. So Corey, this recipe that I love, I'm not really a great baker. And I don't really actually like a lot of flavors, to be honest. But the one thing that I love is milk. And every time, like no matter what it is, whether it's a steak or, you know, a latte or whatever, I like make it super, super creamy. Are you into creamy things?
I am. Like, cheesecake is one of my favorite things in the world. I love ice cream. But I will say that I used to love it more back when I used to have a perm.
I could totally see you with a perm. That would be amazing. I'm curious about the reference between like the creaminess and the perm, but I mean, either way, like those two things, like if I had to present them for some, you know, like thing, I would just like staple them, you know, they're like a staple together, creaminess and perms.
Yeah, I kind of agree. For me, you know, I will say as well that I'm a big fan of Seinfeld. And so, you know, I have to say I've watched them. You know, Kramer's hair is almost like a perm, and you know, and Jerry has the open fridge where Kramer goes over and gets things like ice cream and stuff like that. But one of my favorite episodes was when Kramer showed up with a whole bunch of pennies, and he wanted to get his clothes ironed in the thing that they make calzones in, because he had to buy a calzone for George's boss, who got cranky without his calzones. So that was one of my favorite episodes.
Seinfeld is so random. Every time I watch Seinfeld, though, for some reason, and I know this is going to sound insane, but every time I watch it, like I start to get a rash. It's like I dry up, and like every time I know Seinfeld's coming, I'm going and buying like stock and moisturizer.
Well, I think you need to see a pediatrist.
What are they going to give me, coconut oil?
I don't know, but I just felt that was the word that felt like it fit in that conversation.
Well, coconut oil really is, I mean, I like to drink it. I like to slather it on. Like that has this kind of like gelatinous feel to it. You know, are you a coconut oil kind of guy?
I am, but I actually like rubbing cranberries on more. I like rubbing cranberries on my skin. I don't know if you've ever tried that, but they say that that's, you know, you've got to go with cranberry. That's the brand.
I mean, I never have, but I'm imagining that rubbing cranberry and coconut oil is all about joy. So
yeah, and I think it's probably, you know, it's probably because we started talking about it, we'll start seeing it marketed everywhere now. Like literally in bottles.
Bottles everywhere.
Well, I haven't, I should say. But I know one thing is going to happen later on today whenever I fly from here to Canada is I'm probably going to have jet lag.
Well, I hope it's going to be jet lag filled with some joy. Speaking of joy, can you tell me what is something that brings you joy no matter what? It's
tough because I think on the personal and professional side. So the easy answer would be my family. You know, my kids, my wife, watching like my child, my oldest son is getting older now. So with him, he's older. So I'm seeing all the things, like seeing him, he started playing basketball on this trip. And at 7, I could never have reached the rim, like thrown it up, and he's getting them in like crazy. And so watching them develop, I guess, because you don't get to see, well, you have it happen for yourself, but you don't watch it from the outside looking in. So that brings me joy. But I think the other thing too is impacting other people's lives. And having them come back and say, because you mentioned this is what happened for me, or this is how I've changed what I do, that brings me joy. Just knowing you're helping other people's lives and impacting other people.
Love that. 30 seconds. You wrote the book called The Enlightened Passenger. What is the greatest wisdom, I know there's a lot, but that you feel you have received up till this point in your life?
Wow.
I know.
It's a tough one. You know what? It's strange, but my grandfather always said to me, say yes to everything. And this is going to sound weird, but say yes to everything and figure out how to do it later. And I believe from his perspective, that was great wisdom because he was in a small town and he worked as a carpenter. So if you say yes to all the jobs, everybody loves you. That was great wisdom. because it allowed me to have a juxtaposition for what I learned later when I interviewed all these thought leaders, which is that they have to say no all the time to be able to say yes to only the few things that'll move the needle. So him saying that gave me a frame of reference to understand why he said it, understand why it made sense early on, but why it doesn't make sense for me now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like the wisdom I've learned from thought leaders compared to what I learned from my grandfather, which together meshed.
I love it. Corey, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And everybody, don't forget to go grab Corey's book. But for right now, it's time to go talk to some peeps on the street on this week's. So we are here at Hollywood and Highland for Good Morning Joy, and I'm sitting with the lovely
Monique,
and where are you from, Monique?
Sacramento, California.
Sacramento. She's like right there with her phone. She's like, I am live on TV. What about you? What's your name?
Glennis.
Glennis.
His sister.
Oh, okay. So you guys spend a lot of time together?
Oh my God, yes. What?
She said too much. You guys sound like my sister. Okay. So what brought you here to LA?
My cousin, he did a play last night, so we came to support him. Center.
Oh, very nice shout out. What's his name?
Aaron Cobb. Shout out to Aaron Cobb.
And okay, so I know this is going to be a biased question, but just tell the truth. Was he good?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. Nice to sing and everything.
Okay. All right. Well, what's one of your favorite songs?
That he sing?
No, that you sing.
That
you love.
Sing? Okay, let me go back to the back. Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Which one?
I don't know which one.
Okay, do you want to sing?
No, I don't want to sing it. But I can like Cameo.
Cameo. Okay. What about you? Do you have a favorite song that you sing?
We going up to yonder.
Okay. Can you sing?
Yeah. We going up to yonder. We going up to yonder.
If you could communicate only one word for an entire day, what would that one word be? And not blunt.
Money.
Money. Money, money, money. Okay. And then last question. What is the craziest excuse you've ever used to get out of plans?
I don't got no money, girl.
We're back to money, guys. Thanks so much for joining me today. I will see you next time on Good Morning Joy, where every day starts with a smile.